Hello, welcome to the Mandela Effect Equals Knowledge. My name is Dale DuFay. I'm going to talk about the Panama Canal, which is one of my favorite subjects regarding the Mandela Effect because in this reality, because the Americas are offset by, about 2,500 miles from what I can recall, but you could see the kink in the Isthmus of Panama here because of the geography of this reality on this earth. And we could see this kink in a lot of these Orion dwarfers, but I've seen some, I was on, or actually still there, you know, on a earth where the Isthmus of Panama was straight across. And of course, the reality I recall where this portion of my soul originated, the Isthmus of Panama was straight up and down. Again, that's because the Americas are lined up in that reality, and the Earth is much larger, given it, room on the face of the Earth for that to actually be a reality. But I also, like I say, remember one where South America was further west. Peru was probably in the central time zone in that reality. But that caused the isthmus to be straight across. So the point I'm getting at here is just recently saw something on the History Channel about the Panama Canal and the construction, and I remember the reality where this portion of my soul originated. I studied the Panama Canal extensively because it was such a very interesting topic for me, and how they were able to construct it. And again, that's the reality where the Central America is straight north and south, and the isthmus was very straight. And here we could see this kink, and what that does is it causes the canal to be conformed differently. Now I cleaned up the Google Earth so no names come up or anything, but we can clearly see that to get, in fact, they even have to enter from the Caribbean Sea in these realities. This is the Caribbean Sea, and the reality I recall, it was straight from the Atlantic to the Pacific, straight east and west. But here it's from the Caribbean Sea, and it just, it's crazy. It just goes basically straight south. Then you have to head straight east, straight south, straight east, and then southeast to get to the Pacific Ocean. And that's just remarkable. So again, the point I'm getting at is the construction of this. It took two, countries, almost 2 decades to do this. Now, France started it. They were, the company that started it was successful in doing the Suez Canal back in the late 19th century. Now, so they were awarded the Panama Canal, which you would think would be easier. It's only here it's only like 45 miles. I recall it being, in the reality I recall, it was like 90 miles. And but the thing is you got to keep in mind that during the construction of this, they suffered from malaria and yellow fever. They didn't know what it was from. Of course, the French didn't know, and they lost thousands of lives. Let's go to. I did a kind of a video sideshow of the Panama Canal, and we can start by reading this here in this reality. This is interesting. It says, the other side of the hill, a view of the canal and bridge of the Americas connecting east to west and north to south. The Panama Canal is a ship canal which joins the Caribbean Sea, see how that is, and the Pacific Ocean. One of the largest and most difficult engineering projects ever undertaken. It had an enormous impact on shipping between the two oceans, replacing the long and treacherous route via the Drake Passage and Cape Horn at the southernmost tip of South America. A ship sailing from New York to San Francisco via the canal travels about 6,000 miles, well under half the 14,000 mile route around Cape Horn. Although the concept of the canal near Panama dates back to the early 16th century, the first attempt to construct a canal began in 1880 under the French leadership. After this attempt failed and 21,900 workers died, the project of building a canal was attempted and completed by the United States in the early 1900s, with the canal opening in 1914. The building of the 70 or 48-mile canal, see it's 48 miles, was plagued by problems, including disease, particularly malaria and yellow fever, and landslides. By the time the canal was completed, a total of 27,500 workmen are estimated to have died in the French and American efforts. Since opening, the canal has been enormously successful and continues to be a key conduit for international maritime trade. The canal can accommodate vessels from small private yachts up to large commercial vessels. The maximum size of the vessel that can be used in the canal is known as Panamax. An increasing number of modern ships exceed this limit are known as post-Panamax or Super Panamax vessels. A typical passage through the canal by a cargo ship takes approximately 8 to 10 hours. In fiscal year 2008, 14,702 vehicles passed through the waterway with a total of 309.6 million Panama Canal / Universal Measurement System tons. While the Pacific Ocean is west of the isthmus and the Atlantic to the east, the journey through the canal from the Pacific to the Atlantic is one from southeast to northwest. Isn't that something? This is a result of the isthmus curving back on itself. See that? Now, you know in other realities that's not the case. In the region of the canal, the bridge of the Americas at the Pacific end is about a third of a degree of longitude east and west near Ceylon, near the Atlantic. An estimated 14,000 ships pass through the canal each year. Only 1,000 ships per year pass through the canal at its beginning. So, we could start this sideshow and kind of, talk about this here a little bit as we go. Let's start this, and then we'll go into the slideshow and kind of, talk about this. I mean, first of all, I always wondered why it took so long for two countries to try this. Of course, they had problems. There's Teddy Roosevelt inside one of the steam shovels to promote the canal because they were having big trouble. He had to show up to kind of motivate the people. But here you could see all the navigation corrections they have to make throughout the canal. It looks like 16 different navigation corrections they have to make. And I remember, of course, in the reality I recall where this portion of my soul originated, there was no navigation whatsoever. They just went straight through. And here's some of the French equipment they reused. By the time the Americas started, this was all rusted and under vegetation. And here's some of those Panama-sized ships that go through. This one's actually just barely makes it. But you can see the kind of traffic it has. And this is the Missouri Mighty Mo. And you could see that barely made it. But they had to make it to accommodate ships like that, because that's one of the main reasons the America finished the project, is they knew that it would help them be a naval superpower. And of course it did. Here it is under construction. But as we go through this, I want to talk about a few things as to some of the other reasons why it must have been very difficult to do this, other than the malaria, the problem with mosquitoes. And it was an American scientist that figured it out, that it was the mosquitoes. They actually thought it was ants that was causing it. Here's some of the stocks people could have bought. And of course, the French, it was a complete failure and folly. But again, they had their problems with the mosquitoes, and they took care of them by putting oil in all the water and removing all places where eggs and larvae can develop and things like that. You could see this. It was quite an engineering feat here. And it was in every single reality. But again, of course, they had those problems to deal with. But think about this for a minute. Now, of course, every one of these people involved here worked on the Panama Canal in every single reality. And so think about it. Every single reality, they worked on the Panama Canal. They had replica versions of themselves that they were constantly connected on a subconscious level. Now think about that. So in some realities, they're heading east, you know, constructing the canal and doing all these different, directions. Whereas in other realities, they were going the opposite direction. So that must have caused, subconsciously, of course, it wouldn't be visible or conscious at all, but subconsciously, there must have been internal turmoil. Think about that. That's why it had to have been just a monumental feat, because in every reality, these, even the surveyor, can you imagine the crew that came in and surveyed the Panama Canal? It must have been quite perplexing. Of course, they didn't know why. They had to go through this jungle, and there's actually elevation issues. A mountain they had to go through. That was actually more of an issue in the reality I recall where this portion of my soul originated. There was more. The only issue they had with the geography is elevation, and here they had different issues because there wasn't so much elevation. They had all the navigation corrections to make, all the different angles and directions to go and through. They made that man-made lake there, Gantoon Lake, which is one of the largest human-made lakes on Earth. But they didn't need to make that in reality I recall. In fact, here they had to charge as a river to even use. I mean, it was already in existence, but they made the lake through it and used the Charges River as a route. But there was no such thing in the reality I recall. They had to completely make this canal from scratch. So they were able to go straight east and west there, and with some elevation issues. But here they had, not as much elevation issues, but had to go in multiple different directions. But as you could see, where I'm coming with this. I mean, it makes so much sense why it took so long, of course, beyond the obvious reasons. But again, they had that constant connection with all the other replica versions of themselves in other realities where the canal is completely different. So that had to have been, had to have had an effect on the construction of this. Now think about it. These people here, they didn't know they had replica versions of themselves throughout the entire Milky Way galaxy on Earths in totally different realities where the canal is totally different. I mean, this is insane, all this, what they have to do. Here's the Gantoon Lake, and it's just amazing. See how big this lake is? And then the river, the Charges River and all that. It's just incredible what they had to go through here. The landslides and everything. In fact, they were trying to do it initially as a trench, canal with only one trench and no locks, and that took the American engineers to finally realize that they definitely needed locks. I think they had to raise the vehicles and ships and whatnot like 90 feet. So that's really amazing. I know it was it was more than that on the super Earths, the Sagittarius super Earths, where the Isthmus of Canal or the Isthmus of Panama is straight north and south. They had like 90 miles to go across, and they had to go. There was multiple locks. Here they only have a set of locks on each end. Whereas in the reality I recall, they had locks in the center of the canal as well. So even though it was straight across and easier, in a sense, they still had the elevation issues. Where here they didn't quite have the elevation issues, but they had navigation issues. I mean, it's incredible. Again, this was like a total flop and loss for the French government and people who invested in it. But the Americans did compensate because they used all their equipment, even though it wasn't dire, desperate, need of repair and everything. But it just makes so much sense why it was so difficult. It's amazing they even got it done. But of course they did because they needed to. But these, like I said, these people here didn't have no idea that they had other replica versions of themselves that have been sharing their soul since the day they were born, and then thus working on the same project, but in different realities and going different directions and everything. So that had to have been a contributor in the fact, reason why the canal took so long, and the reality where this portion of my soul originated, the one I recall, it took like 20 years, and here it took a little less, at like 18 years. Of course, it spanned a more, there was a time where it sat, undone, and everything just sitting and abandoned until the Americas came and started took over the project. But I remember the French spending 10 years on it, and here they only spent 8 years on it. But the fact is they still failed to get it done, and America was able to get it done. So it opened about the same time in every reality, and it was constructed around the same time in every reality. But some realities it took longer, some realities it took less, and again that's due to the Isthmus of Panama. And it was interesting how they noted that obviously the kink in the Isthmus of Panama causing the different route in the canal itself. So it's really amazing. So with that, I thank you for watching, and we'll talk at you later. Love you.